been an interesting week, especially with all of the economic landscape going back and forth, Brian. And, last Friday was Black Friday, but I think I heard you called it Black and Blue Friday.
It was a little bit. Now, I didn't go out there and deal with the crowds or anything. Just I don't enjoy doing that. I do like going to malls and doing the people watching thing. I didn't do that this year, but I was calling it Black and Blue Friday because there were some companies that really just kind of missed the mark in terms of pricing or inventory. And that showed up in, I think, the broad sales numbers. Think about those with a good digital presence. Online shopping was up about 14% year over year. Traditional brick and mortar was only up about 0.7%.
And that's not surprising to you that people were doing more clicking than they were walking.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's easier, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's for sure. And you can do more comparison shopping that way. I don't know if you're like me, where when you are doing your comparison shopping, you can just have multiple tabs open and you can shop Target, Amazon, Walmart, all these different online sources. And so the stock market performance since Black Friday, really interesting, is just about every retailer has been up except for, unfortunately, Target. Target has been down since Black Friday, and maybe that's a little bit of hangover from some of the inventory issues they had in the last quarter.
And I think some of the customers are just trying to be more frugal, and that's why they're comparative shopping. And you think about that and how that ties together with the JOLTS number and the employment numbers that we saw this week.
Yeah, this past week we got the JOLTS job opening and labor turnover statistics. It's quite a mouthful, which is why everybody just call it JOLTS, right? And it tells us for the month of October, so it's looking back 2 months, unfortunately, but it tells you how many jobs were open, how many people were being laid off, how many people were quitting. We saw an increase in the number of job openings, which was a little surprising. A lot of those were in retail. And so maybe some of these retailers are thinking that a price-conscious consumer doesn't mean that they're going to stop consuming. It's just they're going to be a little bit more frugal about how they shop. Now, one of the other important statistics in there is the quits rate. That is the percentage of people who are willing to just voluntarily quit their job in hopes of finding a new one. Now, that has been on a downward trend over the last year. People getting a little bit nervous about the health of the economic expansion. But in the month of
post-COVID is part of that too, right? I mean, people were quitting because they were in higher demand. And
yes.
But now things have changed. The pendulum is starting to swing back.
It is. Yep. People are really staying a little bit longer. In the month of October, it ticked up a little bit, but it is still a historically low rate.
And you saw, Linda McMahon was nominated for the Department of Education. That name should ring a bell to those wrestling fans out there as well. But you saw that the Fed Governor Christopher Waller made an MMA example instead of a WWE example.
That's right. And actually, I think the WWE, they're working with mixed martial arts. I think the UFC and all that. And so it all kind of wraps together. But Chris Waller, he's on the board of the Federal Reserve. He came out with the idea that the Fed is like a pilot of a plane where they're trying to get this soft landing. Well, recently he shifted his tone a little bit, or at least his analogies, and he was referring to the Fed's fight against inflation as like an MMA match, this mixed martial arts, how every time the Fed thinks it has inflation in a chokehold, it squirms out.
Right.
But he did give...
a little bend of the back and jumping up, right?
That's right, which, I'm not sure I could see him actually in the ring, in the octagon.
Well, let's talk about that because it was a big part of this political conundrum that we all just went through, inflation, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that, obviously eggs and everything else went through the roof. And so people were concerned about inflation. And there has been, Mr. Economic Professor, there has been second waves of inflation. So I think we should spend a little time on that.
Sure. Yeah, there's this idea that when you get this first round of inflation, it never goes away completely. It's not as though it's here and then it's gone. It oftentimes will have like echoes where you get a second wave. Sometimes it's rather quick. Sometimes it can happen over the course of a number of years. Some of it, I think, is driven by consumer psychology, just as far as if you have persistent inflation, people come to expect that you'll have it. So you can have the inflation go away, but if people are expecting it to come back, sometimes it does come back. It's almost the self-fulfilling
we talk
expectation.
it right into it, existence.
Yep. And so I think a real key thing here as to will we get another wave of inflation in 2025 or 2026 is the extent to which the Fed is able to get inflation to 2%, maybe lower than 2%, to really kind of build that confidence that people aren't expecting inflation, that boogeyman, to come out around the corner again.
And lastly, optimism for future goods and services is part of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As far as optimism, the outlook, if you yourself are a business owner, and if you don't have optimism about what the outlook is, you're not going to invest today, right? So your decision...
Hire more people, put in CapEx.
Exactly.
Have faith, right? That it's going to get better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oftentimes it's said hope is not an investment strategy, but neither is despair.